The morning sun painted golden streaks across the marble floors of Rosewood Palace as Captain Marcus Thornfield made his usual rounds through the royal quarters. The palace had been his home for 15 years, ever since he joined the Royal Guard as a young man with dreams of serving the crown. Now at 35, he commanded respect from every guard in the palace and held the complete trust of Queen Isabella Montclair. Marcus paused outside the Queen's private chambers, noting the unusual silence that hung in the air. Typically, by this hour, the Queen's ladies-in-waiting would be bustling about preparing for the morning's royal duties. The absence of their cheerful chatter sent a small chill down his spine. Something felt different today, though he couldn't quite place what it was. Queen Isabella had been acting strangely for the past few months. The 38-year-old monarch, known for her grace and dedication to the Kingdom of Aldermere, had become increasingly secretive. She canceled public appearances, spent hours locked away in her private study, and seemed distracted during important state meetings. The royal advisors whispered among themselves, concerned about her unusual behavior, but none dared to question the Queen directly. Marcus had served Queen Isabella since she ascended to the throne 10 years ago, following her father's sudden death. He had watched her transform from a nervous young woman thrust into power to a confident ruler beloved by her people. That's why her recent changes troubled him so deeply. The Queen, he knew, was transparent in her dealings, always putting the kingdom first. This new secretiveness was completely out of character. As he continued his patrol, Marcus reflected on the events of the previous week. He had noticed strange comings and goings in the Queen's wing of the palace. Servants reported seeing unfamiliar shadows in the corridors late at night. The Queen's personal maid, Sarah, had approached him privately, expressing her concerns about her mistress's well-being. Sarah mentioned that the Queen often returned to her chambers late in the evening, sometimes with dirt on her shoes and a flush in her cheeks that suggested she had been outdoors. The Kingdom of Aldermere had been peaceful for many years, but political tensions were rising in neighboring countries. Several foreign ambassadors had arrived in recent weeks, seeking audiences with Queen Isabella. Marcus wondered if these diplomatic pressures were affecting the Queen's behavior. Perhaps she was secretly negotiating treaties or dealing with threats that required absolute discretion. Marcus's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps echoing through the corridor. Lady Catherine Blackwood, the Queen's chief lady-in-waiting, appeared around the corner, her usually perfect composure clearly shaken. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a folded piece of parchment. "Captain Thornfield," Lady Catherine called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "I must speak with you immediately. It's about Her Majesty." Marcus's training kicked in, and he immediately sensed the urgency in her tone. Lady Catherine had served the royal family for over 20 years and was not easily rattled. If something had disturbed her this deeply, it was serious indeed. "What's happened?" Marcus asked, guiding her to a private alcove where they could speak without being overheard. Lady Catherine glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "I found this note in the Queen's private sitting room this morning," she whispered, holding up the parchment. "It's not in Her Majesty's handwriting, and the content—" She paused, struggling to find the right words. "Captain, I fear the Queen may be in some kind of danger, or perhaps involved in something that could compromise the crown." Marcus felt his protective instincts surge. The idea that Queen Isabella might be in danger was unthinkable. He had sworn an oath to protect her with his life, and he took that responsibility more seriously than anything else in the world. "Show me the note," he said firmly. Lady Catherine hesitated for a moment before handing over the parchment. As Marcus unfolded it, he could see why it had disturbed her so much. The handwriting was definitely not the Queen's elegant script, but rather bold, masculine strokes that spoke of confidence and intimacy. The note read, "My dearest Isabella, tonight's meeting cannot wait any longer. The garden pavilion at midnight, as always. We must discuss what happens next before others discover our secret. Time is running out and decisions must be made. Until then, you remain forever in my thoughts. A." Marcus read the note twice, his mind racing with possibilities. The informal use of the Queen's first name suggested a relationship that went far beyond formal court interactions. The mention of secret meetings and hidden truths painted a picture that made his stomach clench with worry. "Where exactly did you find this?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with concern. It was partially hidden beneath some official documents on her writing desk, Lady Catherine replied. I was organizing her correspondence when it slipped out. Captain, in all my years of service, I have never seen the Queen behave as she has recently. She disappears for hours without explanation, returns looking disheveled, and seems to be living two completely different lives. Marcus folded the note carefully, his mind already formulating a plan. As captain of the Royal Guard, his duty was clear. He needed to investigate this situation thoroughly, but he also needed to protect the Queen's reputation and the stability of the kingdom. If word of secret meetings and mysterious lovers reached the wrong ears, it could cause a scandal that might shake the very foundations of the monarchy. The sound of approaching footsteps caused both Marcus and Lady Catherine to fall silent. They watched as Queen Isabella herself rounded the corner, moving with purpose toward her private chambers. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that something was different about her appearance. Her usually immaculate hair showed signs of wind, and there was a brightness in her eyes that he hadn't seen in months. As the Queen disappeared into her rooms, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Tonight, he would discover the truth about Queen Isabella's secret meetings, no matter what the consequences might be. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Marcus began his careful investigation. He couldn't simply burst into the Queen's private affairs without evidence, but the mysterious note had planted seeds of concern that demanded answers. The weight of his responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders as he considered the delicate balance between protecting the Queen and potentially uncovering something that could destroy her reputation. Marcus decided to start his investigation by speaking with the palace staff who worked closest to the Queen's private quarters. He began with Thomas, the elderly groundskeeper who had maintained the palace gardens for over 30 years. If anyone had noticed unusual activity around the garden pavilion mentioned in the note, it would be Thomas. He found the weathered man tending to the rose bushes near the Queen's favorite walking path. Thomas looked up with a smile as Marcus approached, his hands still dirty from his work among the flowers. Good afternoon, Captain, Thomas said, wiping his hands on his worn apron. Lovely day, isn't it? The Queen's roses are blooming beautifully this season. Marcus nodded, trying to appear casual despite the urgency he felt inside. Thomas, I wanted to ask you about the garden pavilion. Have you noticed anything unusual there recently? Any maintenance issues or visitors? The old groundskeeper's expression shifted slightly, and Marcus caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Thomas glanced around to make sure they were alone before stepping closer. Well, Captain, since you asked directly, Thomas said in a lower voice, I have noticed some things that struck me as odd. For the past few months, I've been finding the pavilion area disturbed in the mornings. The benches moved slightly, footprints in the soft earth around the structure, sometimes even flower petals scattered about as if someone had been picking bouquets. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Have you seen anyone there? Any idea who might be visiting? Thomas shook his head slowly. No, sir. I do my work during daylight hours, and whoever's been using the pavilion seems to prefer the cover of darkness. But I'll tell you this much. It's not just one person. I've seen at least 2 different sets of footprints on several occasions. The revelation that the Queen might not be meeting this mysterious person alone added another layer of complexity to the situation. Marcus thanked Thomas and continued his investigation, speaking quietly with other staff members throughout the palace. From the kitchen staff, he learned that food had been disappearing from the pantries late at night, not enough to suggest theft, but small amounts that might feed 1 or 2 people during a secret meeting. The night watchman, when pressed gently for information, admitted they had noticed lights in parts of the palace that should have been empty during their rounds. As evening approached, Marcus found himself more troubled than ever. Everything pointed to the Queen conducting secret meetings, but the identity and motives of her mysterious companion remained unknown. He realized that the only way to get answers would be to position himself near the garden pavilion that night and observe whatever was scheduled to happen. Marcus spent the rest of the evening making careful preparations. He selected his darkest clothing and planned a route that would allow him to approach the pavilion without being detected. He also considered what he would do if he discovered something that compromised the Queen's safety or reputation. His loyalty to Queen Isabella was absolute, but his duty to the kingdom was equally important. As the palace settled into its nighttime routine, Marcus made his way through the familiar corridors with unusual stealth. He had walked these halls thousands of times during his years of service, but tonight felt different. Tonight he was not just protecting the queen from external threats, he was investigating her personal life, possibly uncovering secrets she had worked hard to keep hidden. The garden pavilion stood in a secluded area of the palace grounds, surrounded by tall hedges and mature trees that provided natural cover. It was a romantic spot that had been used by previous generations of royalty for private conversations and quiet reflection. Marcus positioned himself behind a large oak tree that offered an excellent view of the pavilion, while keeping him concealed in the shadows. The night air was cool and still, with only the gentle sound of a nearby fountain breaking the silence. Marcus checked his pocket watch. It was nearly midnight. If the note was accurate, whatever secret meeting the queen had planned would begin very soon. Minutes ticked by slowly as Marcus waited in the darkness. Just as he began to wonder if perhaps the meeting had been cancelled or postponed, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching along one of the garden paths. His heart began to beat faster as a figure emerged from the shadows. To his complete surprise, it was not Queen Isabella who appeared first, but a man Marcus had never seen before. The stranger was tall and well-dressed, clearly a gentleman of some standing, but definitely not a member of the palace staff or royal court. He moved with confidence and familiarity, suggesting he had made this journey many times before. The mysterious man carried himself with the bearing of nobility, though Marcus couldn't place his accent when he heard him humming softly to himself. His clothes were of excellent quality but seemed designed for practicality rather than court fashion. Most intriguingly, he carried a small leather satchel that appeared to contain papers or documents. The man settled onto one of the stone benches in the pavilion and began to wait, occasionally checking his own pocket watch. His relaxed demeanor suggested he was completely comfortable in this setting, as if these midnight meetings were a regular part of his routine. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, Marcus heard more footsteps approaching from the opposite direction. This time he recognized the graceful walk of Queen Isabella, though she too was dressed very differently than he had ever seen her. Instead of her usual royal gowns, she wore a simple dark dress that would allow her to move through the gardens without drawing attention. As the queen entered the pavilion, the man rose from the bench and took her hands in what appeared to be a gesture of genuine affection. Even from his hidden position, Marcus could see the warmth in their greeting, the kind of familiarity that spoke of a deep and meaningful relationship. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. Queen Isabella, the monarch he had sworn to protect and serve, was involved in a secret romantic relationship with a man whose identity was completely unknown to the royal court. The implications of this discovery were staggering, and Marcus found himself faced with the most difficult decision of his career. Marcus remained frozen behind the oak tree, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. The intimate greeting between Queen Isabella and the mysterious stranger confirmed his worst fears about the nature of their relationship. As captain of the royal guard, he was trained to handle threats from enemies and foreign agents. But this situation presented challenges he had never imagined facing. From his hidden position, Marcus strained to hear their conversation, though he remained far enough away to avoid detection. The queen and her companion spoke in low, urgent tones that suggested they were discussing matters of great importance. Occasionally, their voices would rise slightly with emotion, allowing Marcus to catch fragments of their discussion. "The pressure from the council is becoming unbearable," he heard Queen Isabella say, her voice carrying a note of frustration. "They're demanding answers about my future plans, and I'm running out of excuses to avoid their questions." The man reached into his leather satchel and withdrew what appeared to be official documents. "Isabella, we knew this day would come eventually. The kingdom needs stability, and your advisors are right to be concerned about the succession. But that doesn't mean we have to abandon everything we've built together." Marcus felt his blood run cold as he began to understand the implications of their conversation. It seemed their secret relationship was not just a matter of the heart, but involved complex political considerations that could affect the entire kingdom. The mention of succession suggested that Queen Isabella's romantic involvement with this unknown man had consequences that reached far beyond personal happiness. "Alexander," the queen said, using the man's name for the first time. You know I would give up my crown for you if it were possible. But I have duties to my people that I cannot simply abandon. The kingdom of Aldermere has been stable for generations, and I will not be the ruler who throws it into chaos for personal desires. So the mysterious man was named Alexander, Marcus noted, filing away this crucial piece of information. But Alexander what? And what was his background that made a relationship with him so problematic for the queen? Alexander moved closer to Queen Isabella, taking her hands in his. My darling, I'm not asking you to abandon your duties. I'm asking you to trust that there might be a way for us to be together that serves both love and duty. The documents I've brought tonight contain a proposal that could change everything. Marcus watched as Alexander spread several papers on the stone table in the center of the pavilion. Even from his distance, he could see they contained official seals and signatures, suggesting they were legal documents of some kind. Queen Isabella leaned over the papers, studying them carefully by the light of a small lantern Alexander had brought. This is incredibly risky, the Queen said after several minutes of reading. If the Royal Council discovers what we're planning, it could be seen as treason. The political ramifications could destabilize not just Aldermere, but our relationships with neighboring kingdoms. I understand the risks, Alexander replied, his voice steady and determined. But consider the alternative. How long can you continue living this double life? How long before someone else discovers our meetings? At least this way we're taking control of our own destiny rather than waiting for circumstances to force our hand. Marcus realized he was witnessing a conversation that could reshape the entire political landscape of the kingdom. Whatever these documents contained, they represented a plan that Queen Isabella and Alexander had been developing in secret, something significant enough to require months of clandestine meetings and careful preparation. The weight of his discovery pressed down on Marcus like a physical burden. As captain of the royal guard, his primary duty was to protect the queen and the stability of the kingdom. But what should he do when those two responsibilities seemed to be in conflict? If Queen Isabella was planning something that could be viewed as treasonous, was it his duty to stop her, even if she believed she was acting in the kingdom's best interests? There's something else we need to discuss, Alexander said, his tone becoming more serious. I received word today that Prince Edmund of Westmarch is planning to arrive at the palace next week. His ambassador sent advance notice of a formal proposal. Queen Isabella straightened abruptly, her body language changing from intimate to alarmed. Edmund, but we agreed months ago that I would handle the marriage negotiations diplomatically. His kingdom needs our alliance, but I never gave any indication that I would seriously consider his proposal. That's exactly the problem, Alexander said gently. Your diplomatic responses have been interpreted as encouragement. Prince Edmund apparently believes he has a genuine chance of winning your hand, and he's coming with a full entourage to make his case formally before your royal council. Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Queen Isabella's recent secretive behavior wasn't just about hiding a romantic relationship. She was trying to navigate complex political pressures involving marriage alliances and international diplomacy. Prince Edmund of Westmarch was known throughout the region as a powerful and ambitious ruler who had been seeking to expand his influence through strategic marriages. This changes everything, Queen Isabella said, pacing within the small pavilion. If Edmund arrives expecting a favorable response to his proposal, and I reject him publicly, it could damage our trade agreements and military cooperation. But if I don't reject him clearly, he might interpret my hesitation as an invitation to pursue his suit more aggressively. Alexander stood and placed his hands on the queen's shoulders, stopping her anxious pacing. Isabella, this is exactly why we need to implement our plan sooner rather than later. Every day we delay makes the situation more complicated. Once our arrangement is made public, it will resolve all these political pressures while protecting both your throne and our relationship. But the scandal, Queen Isabella protested. When the truth comes out, there will be those who question my judgment, my fitness to rule. Some will say I put personal desires ahead of political necessity. And there will be others who admire your courage and authenticity, Alexander countered. You've ruled wisely for 10 years, Isabella. Your people love and respect you. Give them credit for understanding that even queens deserve happiness. Marcus remained hidden behind the oak tree, his mind racing as he tried to process everything he had learned. The situation was far more complex than he had initially imagined. Queen Isabella wasn't simply having a secret affair. She was trying to balance her personal happiness with her royal duties, while navigating international political pressures that could affect the entire kingdom. As the midnight meeting continued, Marcus realized he was facing the most important decision of his career. Should he reveal what he had discovered to the royal council, potentially destroying the queen's plans and personal happiness? Should he confront Queen Isabella directly and demand an explanation, or should he wait and try to learn more about the true nature of their secret plan? The sound of approaching footsteps from a different direction suddenly interrupted his thoughts, and Marcus realized that their clandestine meeting was about to become even more complicated. The approaching footsteps sent a wave of alarm through Marcus as he pressed himself closer to the oak tree, praying that whoever was coming would not discover his hiding place. From the pavilion, he could see that both Queen Isabella and Alexander had heard the sound as well. They quickly gathered the documents from the table, and Alexander extinguished the lantern, plunging the area into darkness. "Someone's coming," Queen Isabella whispered urgently. "We need to leave separately. Take the southern path back to the main road, and I'll use the northern route to return to the palace." But before either of them could move, a familiar voice called out from the shadows. "Your Majesty, I know you're there. Please, we need to talk." Marcus's heart nearly stopped as he recognized the voice of Lord Chancellor William Ashford, Queen Isabella's most trusted advisor, and the second most powerful person in the kingdom. The elderly statesman had served the royal family for over 40 years, and was known for his unwavering loyalty and discretion. His presence at this midnight meeting suggested that the situation was far more serious than Marcus had realized. Queen Isabella and Alexander remained motionless in the pavilion, as Lord Ashford emerged from the path, moving slowly with the aid of his walking stick. Even in the moonlight, Marcus could see the weight of concern on the old man's face. "William," Queen Isabella said, her voice carrying a mixture of surprise and resignation. "How did you know to find me here?" "My dear Queen," Lord Ashford replied as he approached the pavilion, "I have been serving this royal family since before you were born. Very little happens within these palace walls without my knowledge, especially when it concerns the welfare of the crown." Alexander stepped protectively closer to Queen Isabella, clearly uncertain about this unexpected development. "Your Majesty, perhaps I should leave you to speak with your advisor privately." "No," Lord Ashford said firmly, raising his hand. "Mr. Alexander Blackthorne, your presence here is exactly what I need to discuss. The time for secrecy has passed, and we must address this situation before it spirals beyond our control." Marcus felt his breath catch as he heard Alexander's full name for the first time. Blackthorne was a name he recognized. It belonged to a noble family from the neighboring kingdom of Northdale, a family with a complicated political history that included both alliance and conflict with Aldermere. "You know who he is," Queen Isabella said, more a statement than a question. "Of course I know," Lord Ashford replied, settling himself on one of the stone benches with obvious weariness. "Alexander Blackthorne, eldest son of the late Duke of Northdale, rightful heir to one of the most strategically important duchies in the region, a man who has been living in exile for the past 5 years following his father's death and the political upheaval that followed." The revelation hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Alexander wasn't just any mysterious lover. He was royalty himself, albeit displaced royalty whose political situation was apparently complicated enough to require secrecy. The implications of Queen Isabella's relationship with an exiled noble from a neighboring kingdom were staggering. "The situation in Northdale has stabilized," Alexander said, his voice carrying a note of hope. "The regent who seized power after my father's death has lost support among the noble houses. My supporters believe the time is right for me to reclaim my birthright." Lord Ashford nodded slowly, "which is precisely why your relationship with Queen Isabella has become a matter of international importance. If you successfully reclaim your duchy, a marriage between you and our queen would create one of the most powerful political alliances in the region. But if your claim fails, or if the political situation in Northdale deteriorates further, Isabella's association with you could be seen as backing the wrong side in a foreign conflict." Marcus began to understand the complexity of the situation. Queen Isabella wasn't just in love with Alexander. She was potentially negotiating a political alliance that could reshape the balance of power in the entire region. But the risks were enormous. If Alexander's claim to his duchy failed, Queen Isabella could find herself politically embarrassed and diplomatically compromised. "There's more," Lord Ashford continued, his voice heavy with concern. "Prince Edmund's upcoming visit is not simply a marriage proposal. Our intelligence suggests that he has formed an alliance with the current regent of Northdale. If Edmund marries Isabella, and if he supports the regent's continued control of Northdale, it would effectively block Alexander's return to power permanently." "So Edmund isn't just seeking a marriage alliance," Queen Isabella said, her voice revealing understanding and anger. "He's trying to manipulate our kingdom's foreign policy to serve his own political interests." "Exactly," Lord Ashford confirmed. "And that's why the decision you and Alexander have been planning becomes even more critical. If you announce your engagement to Alexander before Edmund arrives, you're not just choosing love over political convenience. You're taking a stance in a conflict that could determine the future of two kingdoms." Alexander moved to stand beside Queen Isabella, taking her hand in a gesture of support. "Isabella, I never wanted to put you in this position. If my presence here creates too much risk for you and your kingdom, I can disappear again. I've survived 5 years in exile. I can survive longer if necessary." "Absolutely not," Queen Isabella said firmly. "William, what do you think we should do? You've guided this kingdom through difficult decisions for decades. I trust your judgment completely." Lord Ashford was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the various options and their consequences. "Your Majesty, in 40 years of service to the Crown, I have learned that the most dangerous political decisions are often the ones that seem safest at the time. Marrying Prince Edmund might appear to be the diplomatic choice, but it would tie our kingdom to his ambitions and potentially make us complicit in the suppression of Alexander's legitimate claim to Northdale." "And if I choose Alexander?" Queen Isabella asked. "Then you're betting the stability of your kingdom on the success of his claim," Lord Ashford replied honestly. "But you're also positioning Aldermere as a kingdom that stands for justice and legitimacy, rather than political convenience. If Alexander succeeds in reclaiming his duchy, the alliance between our kingdoms could provide unprecedented prosperity and security." Marcus found himself deeply moved by the courage and complexity of the decision facing Queen Isabella. She wasn't simply choosing between two suitors. She was determining the future, direction of her kingdom's foreign policy and international relationships. "There's one more factor to consider," Alexander said quietly. "If I reclaim my duchy and we marry, it would likely result in our kingdoms eventually uniting under a single crown. Isabella, you would not just be my wife, you would potentially become the most powerful monarch in the region." The weight of this revelation settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Marcus realized he was witnessing a conversation that could reshape the entire political map of their world. Queen Isabella's secret relationship wasn't just a personal matter. It was potentially the foundation of a new era of regional politics. The magnitude of what Marcus had discovered left him struggling to process the full implications. As he remained hidden behind the oak tree, he realized that he was witnessing a conversation that would determine not just the personal happiness of Queen Isabella, but the political future of multiple kingdoms. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on him like a physical burden. "The timing becomes critical now," Lord Ashford said, his voice taking on the tone of a seasoned strategist. "Prince Edmund's arrival next week was intended to force your hand, Isabella. He's counting on the pressure of a public proposal to make it difficult for you to refuse without causing a diplomatic incident." Queen Isabella began pacing again, her mind clearly working through the various scenarios. "But if we announce my engagement to Alexander before Edmund arrives, we're essentially declaring our position in the Northdale succession dispute. Before we know the outcome, what if Alexander's claim fails? What if the regent's forces are stronger than we anticipated? Then we face those consequences together," Alexander said firmly. "Isabella, I've spent 5 years preparing for this moment. I have supporters throughout Northdale who have been waiting for the right opportunity to act. The regent's grip on power has weakened considerably in recent months, and several noble houses have privately pledged their support to my cause." Lord Ashford leaned forward on his walking stick, his expression grave. "There's something else you both need to know. Our spies have reported unusual military movements along the Northdale border. It appears that Prince Edmund has been secretly providing military support to the regent, far beyond what we previously understood. If Edmund succeeds in marrying Isabella, he would have the resources of 3 kingdoms at his disposal. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he understood the broader implications. This wasn't just about marriage alliances and romantic love. It was about preventing the creation of a military alliance that could threaten the balance of power throughout the entire region. "How much time do we have?" Queen Isabella asked, her voice reflecting the urgency of their situation. "Edmund's entourage is expected to arrive in 6 days," Lord Ashford replied. "But there's another complication. Word has already spread throughout the court about his intended proposal. The Royal Council is expecting you to receive him favorably, and several council members have privately expressed their support for the alliance." Alexander's expression darkened. "Which council members?" "Lord Pemberton, for one," Lord Ashford said with obvious distaste. "He's been advocating for closer ties with Prince Edmund's kingdom for months, though we now suspect his enthusiasm may be financially motivated. There are rumors that Edmund has been making generous loans to certain members of our nobility." Marcus's mind raced as he considered the implications of corruption within the Royal Council. If Prince Edmund had been bribing council members to support his proposal, it meant that Queen Isabella couldn't even trust her own advisors to give her honest counsel about this crucial decision. "We need to move quickly," Queen Isabella said decisively. "William, what would you recommend as our best course of action?" Lord Ashford was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing their limited options. "I believe we should implement a 2-part strategy. First, we need to publicly announce your engagement to Alexander before Edmund arrives. This removes his ability to pressure you with a public proposal and makes our position clear to all interested parties." "And the second part?" Alexander asked. "We need to provide military support for Alexander's claim to Northdale," Lord Ashford said bluntly. "Not openly, of course, but through the same kind of covert assistance that Edmund has been providing to the regent. If Alexander can reclaim his duchy quickly, it legitimizes Isabella's choice and creates the alliance we need to counter Edmund's growing power." The audacity of what Lord Ashford was proposing took Marcus's breath away. He was suggesting that Queen Isabella not only marry an exiled duke, but also secretly support a military campaign to restore him to power. It was a strategy that could lead to either unprecedented prosperity or complete disaster for the Kingdom of Aldermere. "The risks are enormous," Queen Isabella said, voicing Marcus's own thoughts. "If our support for Alexander becomes public knowledge before he succeeds, it could be seen as an act of war against the current Northdale government. Prince Edmund would have legitimate grounds to form a coalition against us. But if we do nothing," Alexander countered, "Edmund will eventually succeed in consolidating his power anyway. At least this way, we're taking action to shape our own destiny rather than simply reacting to his moves." Lord Ashford nodded in agreement. "Isabella, you've ruled with wisdom and courage for 10 years. Your people trust your judgment, and your military commanders are loyal to you personally. If you explain the situation honestly, I believe you'll find more support than you expect." "What about Captain Thornfield?" Queen Isabella asked suddenly, causing Marcus's heart to nearly stop. "He commands the Royal Guard, and his loyalty is absolute. If we're going to implement this strategy, we'll need his support for the security arrangements." Marcus realized with growing alarm that they were discussing bringing him into their conspiracy. As captain of the Royal Guard, his support would indeed be crucial for any plan involving secret military operations and protection from potential retaliation. "Marcus is completely trustworthy," Lord Ashford said with confidence. "I've worked with him for years, and his dedication to both you and the kingdom is beyond question. But this decision must be yours, Isabella. Once we bring others into this circle of knowledge, there's no going back." "Tomorrow," Queen Isabella said after a long pause. "Tomorrow I'll speak with Marcus privately and explain the situation. If he agrees to support our plan, we'll proceed with the announcement of my engagement to Alexander. If not—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. As the midnight meeting began to wind down, Marcus realized that his world was about to change dramatically. Within hours, he would be faced with a direct request from Queen Isabella to support a plan that involved secret military operations, international intrigue, and the potential reshaping of regional politics. The three conspirators began to gather their documents and prepare to leave the pavilion separately. Marcus remained frozen behind the oak tree, knowing that his hidden observation had given him advanced knowledge of a conversation that was meant to be completely confidential. "One last thing," Alexander said as they prepared to part ways. "If something goes wrong, if our plan fails, or if I'm captured or killed during the campaign to reclaim Northdale, I want you to know that these months with you have been the happiest of my life. Whatever happens, I don't regret the choices we've made." Queen Isabella reached up to touch Alexander's face gently. "Nothing will go wrong," she said with a confidence that Marcus hoped she truly felt. "We've planned carefully, and we have Lord Ashford's wisdom to guide us. This time next year, you'll be the Duke of Northdale, and I'll be your wife." As the three figures disappeared into the darkness along different paths, Marcus remained hidden behind the oak tree, his mind reeling from everything he had learned. Tomorrow, Queen Isabella would ask for his support in a plan that could either secure the future of the kingdom or destroy everything they had worked to build. Marcus barely slept that night. He returned to his quarters in the Royal Guard barracks, with his mind churning over everything he had witnessed. The weight of his secret knowledge felt almost unbearable as he lay in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and wrestling with the moral complexities of his situation. By dawn, he had come to a painful realization. His accidental discovery of the Queen's secret meeting had placed him in an impossible position. If he revealed what he had learned, he would be betraying Queen Isabella's trust and potentially destroying a plan that might be in the kingdom's best interests. But if he remained silent and something went wrong, he could be seen as complicit in a conspiracy that had failed to protect the crown. The morning brought its usual routine of inspecting the guards, reviewing security protocols, and coordinating with the palace staff. But Marcus found it difficult to concentrate on these familiar tasks. Every conversation felt surreal when he knew that by evening, Queen Isabella planned to draw him into a conspiracy that could reshape the political landscape of their region. Around midday, a young page approached him with a message that his presence was requested in the Queen's private study at 3 o'clock. The formal summons confirmed what Marcus already knew. Queen Isabella was ready to reveal her secrets and ask for his support. As the appointed hour approached, Marcus found himself standing outside the Queen's study, his hand raised to knock on the heavy wooden door. He paused for a moment, knowing that once he entered, his life would change forever. There would be no going back to the simple clarity of his previous duties as captain of the Royal Guard. "Enter," came Queen Isabella's voice from within. Marcus opened the door to find Queen Isabella seated behind her desk, with Lord Ashford standing beside the window. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the glass created a formal, almost ceremonial, atmosphere that seemed appropriate for the gravity of their conversation. "Marcus," Queen Isabella said, gesturing for him to take a seat in the chair facing her desk. "Thank you for coming. Lord Ashford and I have something very important to discuss with you." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, settling into the offered chair while trying to appear surprised by whatever revelation was coming. Queen Isabella studied his face for a moment before speaking. "Marcus, you've served this kingdom with loyalty and distinction for 15 years. Your discretion and judgment have been invaluable to me personally and to the stability of the crown. What I'm about to tell you requires both qualities in greater measure than ever before." Marcus nodded solemnly. "You have my complete confidence, Your Majesty." "I'm in love," Queen Isabella said simply, her directness catching Marcus off guard despite his foreknowledge. "For the past year, I've been conducting a secret relationship with a man whose identity and circumstances make our love both politically significant and personally dangerous." Lord Ashford stepped forward from the window. "The man is Alexander Blackthorne, the rightful Duke of Northdale, currently in exile following his father's death and the political upheaval that followed." Marcus allowed his expression to show appropriate surprise and concern.
"Your Majesty, the political implications of such a relationship are enormous," Queen Isabella finished.
"Which is why we need your help, Marcus. Alexander and I wish to marry, but the situation is complicated by Prince Edmund's planned proposal next week. and by the ongoing political crisis in Northdale. Over the next hour, Queen Isabella and Lord Ashford explained the full scope of their situation and their planned response. They revealed Alexander's identity, the corruption within the royal council, Prince Edmund's military support for the Northdale regent, and their own plan to announce the royal engagement, while secretly supporting Alexander's campaign to reclaim his duchy. Marcus listened carefully, asking the kinds of questions he genuinely needed answers to while avoiding any indication that he already knew most of what they were telling him. The conversation felt surreal, like performing in a play where he knew all the lines but had to pretend he was hearing them for the first time. "What exactly would you need from me?" Marcus asked when they had finished their explanation. "Several things," Lord Ashford replied. "First, we need your word that this conversation remains completely confidential until we're ready to make our announcement. Second, we need your assessment of the loyalty of the Royal Guard. If our plan triggers retaliation from Prince Edmund or his allies, we need to know we can count on military support. And third," Queen Isabella added, "we need your help coordinating the security arrangements for Alexander's presence in the kingdom. Once our engagement is announced, he'll be a target for assassination attempts by the regent's agents or Prince Edmund's supporters." Marcus felt the full weight of what they were asking. They weren't just seeking his silence or his passive support. They wanted him to become an active participant in their conspiracy. The loyal soldier in him recoiled from the idea of secret military operations and hidden agendas, but the man who had sworn to protect Queen Isabella recognized the genuine threats they were facing. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "these decisions will affect not just your personal happiness but the safety and prosperity of everyone in the kingdom. Are you certain that the potential benefits justify the enormous risks?" Queen Isabella leaned forward, her expression intense with conviction. "Marcus, I've spent 10 years putting duty before everything else in my life. I've made countless sacrifices for the good of the kingdom, and I would make them again without hesitation. But this time, I believe that following my heart and standing up for what's right serves both love and duty simultaneously." "Alexander's claim to Northdale is legitimate," Lord Ashford added. "The regent who seized power after his father's death has ruled through intimidation and corruption. Supporting Alexander isn't just about Isabella's personal happiness. It's about standing against tyranny and supporting the rightful order of succession." Marcus found himself genuinely moved by their arguments, even though he had already heard them the night before. There was something compelling about their willingness to risk everything for both love and justice, even when safer options were available. "If I agree to help," Marcus said slowly, "I need complete honesty about everything going forward. No more secrets, no more hidden meetings that I'm not aware of. If I'm going to risk my career and possibly my life for this plan, I need to be a full partner in its execution." Queen Isabella and Lord Ashford exchanged a glance that seemed to communicate volumes. Finally, the Queen nodded. "Agreed," she said firmly. "From this moment forward, you'll be involved in every aspect of our planning. But Marcus, once you commit to this course of action, there will be no turning back. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility?" Marcus looked at the two people who had guided the kingdom through years of prosperity and peace. He thought about the genuine love he had witnessed between Queen Isabella and Alexander, and about the courage it took to stand against corruption and tyranny. Most importantly, he thought about his oath to protect the crown and the kingdom, and his growing belief that this risky plan might be the best way to honor that oath. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said with finality. "I'm prepared to support your plan completely." The relief on Queen Isabella's face was immediate and unmistakable. "Thank you, Marcus. I knew I could count on you." "Now," Lord Ashford said, moving to the desk and spreading out a map of the region, "let's discuss the practical details of what we're going to do." The next 5 days passed in a whirlwind of secret preparations and carefully orchestrated moves. Marcus found himself at the center of a complex operation that required precise timing and absolute discretion. Working closely with Queen Isabella and Lord Ashford, he coordinated security arrangements, identified trustworthy members of the Royal Guard, and helped plan the public announcement that would change everything. On the morning of the 5th day, just 24 hours before Prince Edmund's expected arrival, Queen Isabella stood before her royal council in the great chamber of the palace. Marcus positioned himself at the back of the room, watching the faces of the council members as their queen prepared to make an announcement that none of them anticipated. "Lords and ladies of the council," Queen Isabella began, her voice carrying the authority and confidence that had made her a beloved ruler. "I have called this emergency session to inform you of a decision that will affect our kingdom's future and our relationships with neighboring realms." Lord Pemberton, the council member whom Lord Ashford had identified as potentially corrupt, leaned forward with obvious interest. Marcus could see the expectation on his face clearly. He believed the Queen was about to announce her acceptance of Prince Edmund's upcoming proposal. "After months of careful consideration and consultation with my most trusted advisors," Queen Isabella continued, "I am pleased to announce my engagement to Alexander Blackthorne, the rightful Duke of Northdale." The reaction in the chamber was immediate and dramatic. Several council members gasped in surprise while others began speaking urgently among themselves. Lord Pemberton's face went pale, and Marcus could see him calculating the implications of this unexpected development. "Your Majesty," Lord Pemberton said, rising to his feet with poorly concealed alarm, "surely this decision requires more discussion with the full council. The political ramifications of such an alliance have been thoroughly considered." Lord Ashford interrupted smoothly, moving to stand beside the Queen. "The Crown's decision is final, and preparations for the royal wedding will begin immediately." Marcus watched as the various council members processed this information. Some seemed genuinely pleased, recognizing the strategic wisdom of supporting Alexander's legitimate claim to Northdale. Others appeared concerned about the risks involved in backing an exiled duke against an established regime. And a few, like Lord Pemberton, seemed genuinely distressed by the decision. "What about Prince Edmund?" asked Lady Catherine Blackwood, Queen Isabella's chief lady-in-waiting. "He arrives tomorrow expecting to make his proposal. Prince Edmund will be received with all appropriate courtesy," Queen Isabella replied diplomatically. "However, he will be informed immediately upon his arrival that I am already engaged to be married. I trust he will understand that this decision serves the best interests of both our kingdoms." After the council session, Marcus accompanied Queen Isabella and Lord Ashford to a private meeting room where Alexander was waiting. The exiled duke had spent the past 5 days in hiding within the palace, protected by Marcus's most trusted guards while final preparations were made for his public appearance. "It's done," Queen Isabella said as she entered the room, moving immediately to Alexander's side. "The announcement has been made, and by tomorrow evening every court in the region will know of our engagement." Alexander embraced her gently, his relief obvious. "And the council's reaction?" "Mixed as we expected," Lord Ashford replied. "But the decision is made and announced. Now we move to the second phase of our plan." Marcus stepped forward. "The ships are ready. We have 3 vessels standing by to transport your supporters from Northdale, along with the weapons and supplies they'll need. The captains have been told they're carrying trade goods, and only I know the true nature of their cargo." Over the past 5 days, Marcus had coordinated the most complex military operation of his career. Using loyal contacts in the merchant fleet, he had arranged for secret shipments of weapons and supplies to Alexander's supporters in Northdale. More importantly, he had helped plan the transportation of nearly 200 trained soldiers who would support Alexander's campaign to reclaim his duchy. "The timing will be critical," Alexander said, studying the maps they had spread across the table. "My supporters need to act simultaneously in 3 different cities. If the regent learns of our plans before all the pieces are in place, he'll have time to organize a defense. Which is why we're not waiting," Queen Isabella said firmly. "Alexander, you'll leave for Northdale tonight. By the time Prince Edmund arrives tomorrow and realizes what we've done, you'll already be across the border and moving toward your father's castle." The audacity of their plan still amazed Marcus. While Prince Edmund traveled toward Aldermere expecting to propose marriage, Alexander would be launching a military campaign to reclaim his birthright with the secret support of the woman Edmund had intended to marry. That evening, as the sun set over the palace grounds, Marcus found himself in the garden pavilion where he had first discovered Queen Isabella's secret. This time, however, he was there as an invited participant in the farewell gathering between the Queen and her soon-to-be husband. "The irony is extraordinary," Alexander said as he prepared for his departure. "Edmund arrives tomorrow thinking he's about to gain control over 2 kingdoms, but instead he'll discover that he's lost his opportunity to control either one. "Be careful," Queen Isabella said, her voice tight with emotion despite her attempt to remain composed. "Once you cross into Northdale, I won't be able to protect you. Everything depends on the loyalty of your supporters and the success of your initial moves." Alexander took her hands in his expression serious but confident. "Isabella, we've planned this carefully. My supporters have been preparing for months, and the region's control has weakened considerably. The people of Northdale remember my father's just rule, and they're ready for change." Marcus stepped forward. "Your Grace, the escort is ready. We have a company of volunteers from the Royal Guard who will accompany you to the border, disguised as merchants. Once you're safely across, they'll return with word of your successful arrival." "And if something goes wrong?" Alexander asked. "Then we adapt," Queen Isabella said firmly. "But nothing will go wrong. This time tomorrow, you'll be in Northdale, and by the end of the week, you'll be the rightful Duke once again." As Alexander prepared to leave, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary events of the past week. He had gone from being a simple palace guard to being a key conspirator in a plan that could reshape the political map of their world. The risks were enormous, but so was the potential for creating a more just and stable region. The farewell between Queen Isabella and Alexander was both tender and businesslike, reflecting the balance between love and duty that had defined their entire relationship. They embraced briefly, exchanged final words of encouragement, and then Alexander disappeared into the darkness with his escort. 3 days later, as Prince Edmund and his elaborate entourage departed from the palace in obvious disappointment and barely concealed anger, a messenger arrived with news from Northdale. Alexander's campaign had been swift and decisive. The region's forces, weakened by years of unpopular rule and internal divisions, had offered minimal resistance. Alexander had successfully reclaimed his father's castle and was now in control of the duchy. Marcus stood beside Queen Isabella on the palace balcony as she read the message aloud to the gathered crowd below. The people of Aldermere, who had wondered about their queen's secretive behavior for months, cheered enthusiastically as they learned about her engagement to a duke who had proven his courage and legitimacy through decisive action. "Citizens of Aldermere," Queen Isabella called out to the crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "I present to you Alexander Blackthorne, Duke of Northdale and your future king. Together, our kingdoms will enter a new era of prosperity, justice, and strength." As the cheers echoed across the palace grounds, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that his decision to support the Queen's risky plan had contributed to this moment of triumph. The secret meetings in the garden pavilion had led to public celebration in the palace courtyard, and the love between Queen Isabella and Alexander had become the foundation for a powerful political alliance. 6 months later, as Marcus stood guard at the royal wedding ceremony, he reflected on the courage it had taken for Queen Isabella to choose love over political convenience. Her willingness to risk everything for both personal happiness and political justice had created exactly the kind of outcome that justified the enormous risks they had all taken. The kingdom of Aldermere had gained not just a king, but a powerful alliance that would protect their prosperity for generations to come. And Marcus had learned that sometimes the most important duty of a royal guard is not just to protect the crown, but to help the crown make decisions that serve both the heart and the kingdom's highest ideals.